life to become more unfruitful than if you hold resentment and unforgiveness in bitterness. You know, I've been in the church. This is my 30th year as a pastor. And I've lived long enough and I've pastored enough to know that a lot of times God's people sometimes struggle with forgiveness. That's why Jesus felt the need to repeat it. That listen, you got to forgive. Because if you don't forgive, neither will your Heavenly Father forgive. And I've learned that if you want to be free, how many want to be free? And if you want to be free and you want to stay free, you got to live a life of regular forgiveness. You got to let it go. You can't hold things. Right now, one of the reasons why so many people are bound up in the church is because they're holding things. They're holding grudge. Something, it could be something that happened in your childhood. It could be something that happened as an adult. It could be something that happened in your home. We live in a fallen, sinful world. And I want you to know that we all carry baggages. But aren't you glad that Jesus came to free us? Come on, give God some praise that he came to free us. And you can be free. But if you're going to ever have deep roots, you got to deal with the poisonous weed. And that might be a word for somebody today that God says you got to get rid of. You can't ignore it. You can't think it's going to go away. It's going to eventually produce a harvest. And last thing I want to share as I close here. How many know if you're going to have roots, you plant anything, how many know it requires maintenance? You can't just plant it and expect it to stay and grow. You got to regularly take care of it. The first time my wife wanted it was her idea. She wanted to have a garden and wanted some vegetables and stuff. And I planted the stuff, but I thought it would just take care of itself. But you know, it needs maintenance. And likewise, our spiritual roots need maintenance. And so I say that if we're going to grow deep roots, we must maintain our love walk. Listen what in other words, we must regularly water the roots with the love of God. Ephesians 3:17 says this, then Christ will make his home in our hearts as you trust him, and your roots will grow down deep into God's love and keep you strong. You know, he says it, then you will come to comprehend with all the saints the depth, the breadth, the height, and the length of God's love. And then you're going to know the fullness of God's love. I want you to know that, listen, I remember this as a young pastor, Pastor Pitts. Listen, I was invited to a meeting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And a great man of God who's since gone home to be with the Lord. His name was Kenneth Hagin. And it was a ministers' conference. And he said, listen, all you young ministers, I want to tell you what has been the secret to me walking in health. For those that know Kenneth Hagin's testimony, he was miraculously healed, I think, when he was 17 years old. And God blessed him with a healing ministry and a faith ministry. And he lived to a ripe old age. But he was sharing in his latter life. He said, I want to tell you it's been the secret to me walking in healing and health. He says, I've learned to maintain my love walk. I've learned to, he said, people have lied on me, people have wrote books about me, people have done everything, but I've purposed to live a life of love. Ephesians said that this way. He said, imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you're his dear children, and live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. I'm telling y'all, listen, the older I got born again when I was an 18-year-old young man, a senior in high school. I had a teacher who shared the gospel with me, a coach. His name was Coach Bill Poole. Forever grateful. That was 45 years ago. And I remember clearly how God changed my life. But if you're going to stay on fire, if you're going to stay full of God, you're going to have to learn how to maintain your roots by regular watering them with the love of Jesus. Living a a life of love. The older I get, the more I realize how important. John says, dear children, walk in love. He says, when you read behind John, and the older he got, all his writing, his whole letter is just about love. He talks more about love than any other of all the apostles that walked with Jesus. 1 John 4:7-8, he says, dear children, I say love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not, knoweth not God, for God is love. And I'm telling you, listen, I didn't come to bring a deep message to you today. I came to tell you, if you want to have deep roots, you're going to have to learn, listen, you got to first of all do the hard work. Let God uproot some things in your life. Secondly, I say, you're going to have deep roots. You're going to have to deal with any poison weeds. You can't plant nothing and not expect weeds not to grow. But you got to uproot those weeds. But here's last, you're going to maintain deep roots by learning to live a life of love. I want to tell y'all this last story.